Welcome to the Redemption Physical Therapy Podcast. I'm Marissa.
And I'm Frederick.
Today we're going to be talking about how to fix low back pain in the squat.
We are going to go over the common causes and simple solutions, okay? And we're going to get right into it. So starting off with the common causes, we got number one, lack of ankle dorsiflexion mobility.
Yep. Sounds like a weird one, right? And you're like, how can the ankle affect something so high up the chain? A lot of times what we see is when we lack ankle dorsiflexion, that's what allows our knee to go over our toes, to drive over our toes, right? So if we're not able to get that knee drive over the toes because our ankle is stiff, we're going to have a little more of a vertical shin, okay? In order to not fall over, something has to counteract that vertical shin, which is where we have that more forward trunk lean, which obviously puts a little more strain on the back, just based off of where, like for a back squat, where the weight is. If we're kind of taking that weight further away from our base of support, it's going to put more strain on the back, right? So we're adjusting for the lack of ankle mobility with a forward trunk lean, placing more strain on the back, which can potentially cause back pain.
Right. And if you're already kind of struggling with back pain in general, like just that lack of ankle dorsiflexion is just going to exacerbate the issue.
Yeah, for sure.
So getting into the second point is poor core strength and poor bracing mechanics.
Right. So when we think of core strength, right? So when we think of strength of anything, right? We just think of like this raw strength. A lot of times, like it says, it's more of like the coordination of the core, the coordination of bracing, or even just knowing how to brace. It's not really something that we're taught in a sense, right? And like, you hear coaches all the time, like brace your core, or make sure your core is tight. And it's like, okay,
I've
well,
said
what
it plenty of times.
Yeah, me too, all the time. And then when they don't correct it, I'm like, well, yeah, they might not know what the hell I mean.
Yeah.
Like, what does brace your core mean?
Yeah.
Some people don't know how to brace their core. And that's, maybe for a different podcast, but that's something that like we have to literally train, just like anything else. We have to train how to brace properly, how to coordinate that with breath and with load and movement and whatnot. And that's what will translate to a more stable spine when we have load on our back.
Right. Because I see it as like, just like you said, it's the dynamic core stability that's going on throughout that movement, because it's not like, it is somewhat rigid, but things are moving
right
as you're doing that squat motion. So with those things moving, the core needs to be able to coordinate throughout that whole entire range. And I'd say like something there with that bracing is, I always tell some of my patients that have like low back pain, is that, all right, so your core, right, may be strong enough before you had the issue, but now that you have this issue, we have to just build that core bracing tolerance a lot higher than what it was before. So you just have to be able to coordinate in more, let's just say, higher load situations than you would have before you had the injury.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Like your core can be strong. You can already have a strong core, right? But at the same time, when you have a low back pain, then you have to isolate that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it's not just saying that, oh, the core is the foundation of everything, which it is. But the core is what we need to focus in on even when you don't have pain, because you're already focusing on that when you're doing those squats.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next thing would be number 3, which is lack of hip mobility.
Yep. So, I think we've talked about this multiple times. Like, so when we have a lack of mobility somewhere and we're trying to gain, for example, a full depth squat, we have to get it somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm lacking hip, more commonly than not, it's hip internal rotation, right? We think external a lot, but it's internal rotation, right? If I'm not able to kind of have that hip move internal rotation inside the socket, then we have to get it somewhere else. We talked last time about the knees kind of caving in, but it can go up the chain too, where now my back is not moving properly because my hips are stiff. So there's different stresses and forces that are going through the spine that maybe it's not really meant to handle or able to handle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the one that I see a lot. And I'll say this, like, I didn't assess this until I started to think about how I normally train my athletes. So I didn't assess it in the clinic. This is what I'm talking about. So I get people that come in, car accident, low back pain, whatnot. They're trying to get out of that low back pain. So it's the same thing that we mentioned in the core. Like before, they were okay, but once they had an injury, now we have to build that tolerance even higher.
Mhm.
So just the little things won't irritate their lower back. So same thing here, because now those little motions that they were able to get away with, that excessive low back motion that they're having, that excessive spinal flexion or spinal extension that's coming from the lumbar spine instead of coming from the hips, that movement. Now we have to, make sure we are moving optimally through our hips,
Yep.
right? Because before you can get away with it, before you had pain. Now that you have pain, every single little thing gives you some type of irritation.
Yep.
So addressing those hips, and it's good. Like, okay, you got an injury. I know it's not a good thing,
Yeah.
but now we're addressing something that you never really thought could have been an issue for your lower back.
Yep.
And now I'm showing you how like this can affect your lower back. And you're just like, okay, stick with these exercises so that you don't have to come see me again.
Right.
You know?
And even like, you say like, the different tolerance levels before and after injury, right?
Hmm.
Also just saying like, just like you just said, the body's really good at compensating. So at like lighter loads, like when, maybe you're new to CrossFit or functional fitness and whatnot, and you're starting squatting, you may not have pain, you may still have tight hips,
Hmm.
may not have pain until we've built strength. Like our body can still get strong via compensations, right?
Yes.
So now we've built the strength that we can load to a certain, whatever percentage,
Mhm.
but we still have tight hips. And
Yes.
now it starts to affect the mechanics, right? Because that
Mhm.
load is now catching up to the deficits that we have at whatever
Yeah,
area.
no, definitely. Because we'll see it all the time, right? Like somebody will be moving, and we're just like, oh, you're not in pain. That doesn't hurt.
Right.
Like their backs rounded, and we know that their hips are tight. Just like that doesn't hurt, and they're just like, no, I'm fine, I'm
Yeah.
okay. And you're just like, bro,
Yeah.
sooner
One
or
day,
later,
yeah.
sooner or later, you're gonna feel it.
Yeah.
So it's like all those compensations, but one thing that if you don't necessarily have pain right now, but you realize that you got excessive tightness after like high volume squatting or after heavy squatting, that might be an indication that either the ankle dorsiflexion is lacking or maybe even those hips,
Mhm.
that internal rotation or external rotation is lacking.
Yep. Good
Because
point.
I used to have that a lot, honestly. My low back would be fired up. And really, my ankle mobility is crap. I'm just saying that right now. My ankle mobility is crap. But when I wore my lifters all the time, like it made it a lot better.
Yeah.
And one thing, it's okay to wear lifters, folks. Like if lifters help with your mechanics right now while you're working on your ankle mobility, that's fine. Like you can wear your lifters.
Yeah.
Like there's some people out there that'll be like, well, if you can't do this with bare feet, right? Like if you can't squat with bare feet, then you shouldn't be squatting in the first place, or don't squat until you get your ankle mobility correct or whatnot. And it's just like, what? Well, what are we doing here?
Yeah. So
Like,
I'm just not going to squat. I'm just going to work on ankle rocks
right?
for how long until I gain the mobility.
Seriously.
And we also talked about that one, I don't even remember what podcast, but how you can gain mobility by just performing the actual movement,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
We can change the load.
Yeah.
But like great way to gain ankle mobility is to squat.
Yeah. Yeah. You can squat and just put emphasis on that movement pattern that you're trying to gain
Mhm.
instead of being like, okay, I'm gonna do heavy bot squats. It's just like, okay, but my ankle mobility is crap. Let me do goblet squats, sit in that position for an extended period of time, and then maybe rock a little bit side to side and get that ankle range of motion there.
Yep.
But also my internal rotation of my hips were crap. She saw it when she had an assessment on me. So I had to work on that. And sure enough, when I worked on those things, like my squat felt magical. I'm telling you, like it felt so good. Like once my hips were opened up, and then once I got more ankle range of motion. I remember doing this one thing with one guy, and it was really just giving him a little bit of range of motion in his hips, and
Mhm.
then also getting him a little bit more active on his lateral hip, but through the squat, right?
Yeah.
Putting a band around the top of his knees, having him do some goblet squats, and then doing some internal rotation work. Even though he didn't gain as much range of motion or whatever, but that little bit of activation, that little bit of range of motion in the hip allowed him to have way more power coming out of the bottom of
Oh
the
yeah.
squat.
Yeah. The torque production changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not only just to get you out of pain, but it's also to help you improve your performance in the squat.
Yep.
Like if you feel like you're weak out of the hole in the squat, get those hips right. Like check your hip mobility, check your ankle mobility, and check the lateral side of your hip and that strength, which we're gonna get into because we spent a lot of time on this one. So that's the next point. Lack of glute strength.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, lateral glute strength, even just glute max strength, right? Hip
Yeah.
extension, straight up, we talk about this all the time. But yeah, just like you said, one, do we have the range of motion for all those muscles to fire correctly?
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if we're super tight in our hips, then like the length tension of the muscles, the glutes that are surrounding the hips is going to be limited,
Hmm.
right? Which decreases torque, decreases performance. But yes, just overall lack of strength is going to highly change the way the hips are moving in the socket, highly change the way we're able to like maintain that whole knee drive over our toes, that type of thing. And again, where does the load go? Up and down, up and below the chain,
Yeah.
usually in the back.
Right. Yep.
Plus
Hmm.
plus if the glutes aren't firing properly,
Yeah.
again, something has to dominate, right? So the back muscles are probably dominating,
Hmm.
right? If they're strong enough to handle that load, you might be okay for some time, right? Because your back should be strong
Yeah.
too,
For
right?
sure.
If they're not strong enough to handle that load, well, then you're definitely going to have pain. And it's going to be something that, like, at what point is it going to fail?
Yeah.
It's like, before we start actually addressing the hips.
Yeah.
So yeah, your glutes are not firing properly. Something's got to dominate. Just like when our quads are not firing properly, we're probably hamstring dominant.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Something's got to dominate to compensate through the movement,
Right.
right? It's just a matter of how long can it do it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good that you emphasize like not just the lateral glute, but like your actual glute max,
Yeah,
right?
the
So
big part of the glute.
yeah, yeah, that big thing back there. So, but basically, like lack of glute strength, and one of the things that you could think about too, if you only get that pain whenever you go up to a heavy load, understand that potentially the little bit of activation exercises that you're doing might not actually help you with those heavier loads. That you might need to maybe wear a band during those heavier loads.
Mhm.
Or maybe you need to find a movement variation. Maybe it's a hip thrust and load it up really heavy to get your glutes a little bit more active.
Mhm.
Maybe taking way more time in those positions, maybe even doing pauses in those positions that you feel like you have the weakness in during your squat. So if it's like coming up out of the bottom of the squat, maybe pausing on the way up to build that strength there, but really focusing in on building the strength in those positions that you're the weakest in. Because sometimes it's just like, okay, well, I think I got weak glutes, so I'm just gonna do a few like bend, look, couple clamshells. I know how much
Yeah. Oh God,
you love
clamshells.
clamshells.
Golly.
um, but yeah, just maybe wearing a band around the top of your knees, like this, a simple solution, right? During your heavy
Yeah.
squatting, would be one modification that you could do. Right.
And recognizing that lack of strength and lack of like muscle coordination or activation are different things. So
Mhm.
the band great for activation, right? But if
Mhm.
we are literally lacking like raw strength, then yeah, like you said, you need to do accessories that are meant for actual glute strengthening,
Mhm.
or RDLs, those type of things
Yeah.
where we're
Yeah.
actually growing the muscle fibers.
Yeah.
The activation drills are great, right? Especially if it's like, hey, they just don't know how to turn their glutes on.
Mhm.
How can we teach them how to turn them on?
Yeah.
If they have both problems where they can't turn it on and they literally are lacking like hypertrophy, right?
Yeah.
Then yeah, then we have to accessorize with glute strengthening exercises.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that really played a huge factor into like the strongest I got. I was doing a basic program, squats, an accessory movement, and maybe one more core movement, and that's literally it for that day.
Mhm.
But the accessory movement was some type of posterior chain movement, so it might
Right.
have been RDLs. I really love RDLs. All my clients know that I love RDLs because just about every single one of them do
Do
it.
RDLs. Hey,
Yes.
they're a great exercise.
But they're really good for not only reinforcing the back strength, but also like the posterior chain strength. And
Yep.
you can load it up really heavy, right? So then it's actually getting your glutes are getting exposure to heavy loading.
True.
But another one was reverse lunges. So I did back rack reverse lunges. If you ever want your glutes to be fired up,
Seriously, that's the one thing.
do back rack reverse lunges. I
Yeah.
promise you. And just that isolated load on each side can help balance out. Like one glute may be a little bit weaker than the other. And for the most part, like we all have one side that's not as strong as the other. But building that up can really isolate some good strength in that area. So then you can build the strength up that you actually need instead of trying to just do a small activation drill that's not really targeting the the strength level that you need to not have pain when you get to those higher lows in your squat.
Right. Yep.
All right. So the next one is poor positioning or positional awareness.
Yeah. So kind of like what we were just talking about, like it may not be that they're lacking in actual strength, right? They may just have like a poor awareness of their knees caving in. You know what I mean? It's like they can do it with their knees not caving in with like certain cues or like maybe if they watch themselves like we
Yeah.
talked about, right? But yeah, they may just have like a poor awareness of like where their body is in space.
Yeah.
You know, something that we can train, something that needs to be trained. But that's, and how do we train that? Like, we talk a lot about this tempo work and the pauses that you were
Mhm.
talking about, finding your sticky points or finding your area where you do break down. And that's the point where we're pausing and stopping and trying to get those connections of the proper position. But yeah, there's like, it's not always just a pure strength thing.
Yeah.
They could be strong enough. They just don't know where their body is in space.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy. But it happens.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound crazy to us, of
Yeah.
course, right? But just think about it this way: if for you and watching here, if you've ever gone through a movement and you're just like every time you do it, it feels different. You haven't built that coordination in that movement yet, right? So you haven't built that competency in that movement. So we want to think about it as movement mastery,
Mhm.
right? We want to master these movement patterns so that way we can get the most out of them.
Yeah.
So if that means like you have to reduce the load. If that means you have to slow it down, like slow it down because it's going to pay dividends in the long run, right? So you may have 12 weeks where you're just like I'm still at 70% or 75% because I have to do tempo. But by the time you go back up to those heavy lows 3 months later, you're just going to be like, "Oh, this is a piece of cake. Like
Yep.
this feels great." Because that refinement of that movement allows you to express your physical capacity a lot better than it does if your body's like moving around, your knees caving in on this side, or your ankle's doing something weird on the other side, or your back is still trying to figure out like where to properly like, do I arch here or do I just keep this brace down here? Like your body's doing all these things, but once you slow it down, the body learns how to actually coordinate itself properly within that movement.
Mhm.
Yes, you have to find your stance, what feels comfortable for you for a
Right.
squat, right? But once you know that, you re-ingrain that by continuously doing it the same way over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And in the functional fitness space, what we get in trouble with is that, and this is a hard thing to kind of battle, is when you do a strength portion, right? So you may have your Olympic lifting or you may have your squatting at the beginning of your class, but then you go into the Metcon and then you have that same movement and you have to do it fast
Yeah.
for someone who hasn't really learned it yet.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to ingrain like really good movement patterns there.
Yes.
So if you are participating in a class, then one of the things that you can do is just be like, okay, well, I know my squat pattern isn't that great. So let me do some more focused work outside of class,
Mhm.
right? Maybe after class, like you do like 3 sets of 10 of squats and just really focus in on your tempo,
Mhm.
right? So that can try to override like what's going on in the class environment.
Yeah.
Um,
And then scale appropriately during the class.
yes, scale appropriately during the class.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't know what to do to scale, ask your coach.
Yeah.
Your coach should be able to guide you on like what would be the appropriate scaling for you in that sense. But yeah, no. So again, poor positioning or positional awareness is a huge one to keep in mind as well. So moving on to the next one, we got lack of thoracic mobility and or strength.
Hmm. Again, probably seems like a little bit of a weird one, right?
Mhm.
And we'll especially see this in like front squats and stuff like that, but it's
Yeah,
important in back squats too.
yeah,
So just the ability of our upper back or our
yeah,
mid back really
yeah,
to extend and flex naturally and within a normal range of motion, but also to be able to kind of extend and maintain that extension, which is where the strength comes in, right?
yeah,
If I have a weight on me and I don't have enough upper back strength and it causes me to kind of collapse and crush and the cave, well, that's going to be a problem, obviously. So yeah, that thoracic spine, again, will show up in different kinds of squats, but it's important no matter what, especially when we're loading the entire spine. Like when I've got a back squat on, I'm not just loading my low back, I'm
right.
loading the entire column, right? So if I have a weakness at any point of that column, it's going to be a problem. And the thoracic can play a role there.
Yeah,
We just have a breakdown in posture,
yeah.
you know?
Just like you said, I mean, it it plays into the weak link in the chain, right? So
Mhm.
if you are weak in your upper back, then your lower back is going to try and overcompensate for that weakness there. So it's
Mhm.
going to have to maybe extend a little bit harder than it would if you had a good extension of
Mhm.
your upper back,
Yep.
right? So just think about like a weak link in the chain, you got something to address.
Yep.
Okay. So another thing is just like that, just positioning. The spine is just trying to reorganize itself
Yeah.
in order to stack appropriately in order to not have that pain. So movement compensations, a lot of random things happen down the chain. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you lack that positional awareness there in your upper back, one, strength, mobility, and then maybe just knowing how to actually lock it in appropriately before you set up. Because sometimes we could just get into the habit of, all right, just going under the bar and just putting it on our back and just stepping out without even locking things
Yeah.
in.
Yep. And that's like kind of like that whole bracing technique. Like
Yeah.
maybe some people don't know how to lock in their lats.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's something that we have to train and teach and coach and practice and whatnot.
Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah.
And sometimes like it also can come from the shoulder as well.
Yeah.
Like that inability to do that. And that's when you'll see the guys like that'll put their arms way out to the
Yeah. Like,
side and they're
like
just like,
this. Yeah.
all right, so do you want to fix this? Maybe,
Yes.
or do you just want to continue to squat like this? Does it make you feel good?
Yeah.
Okay, hey.
Hey.
If it makes you feel good, it makes me
Yeah.
happy. All right.
Be where you are.
All right. So now we're gonna get into the solutions here. So with the ankle dorsiflexion, so lack of ankle dorsiflexion, obviously,
Yep.
we're
You're
gonna
going
do
to
some
work on
mobility.
dorsiflexion. Yep. Yep.
So,
One of my favorite ones is the banded one, right?
yeah,
I always talk about that. You know, these are all on our YouTube too. You can just
yeah,
look at ankle, and there's a ton of drills on the ankle, right? But I really like you said, I like you know, even if I have it banded, or even if I'm just putting my leg up and driving my knee over my toe, I like
mm-hmm,
to load it. You
yeah,
know, so sometimes I'll just put my foot up on a box, and I'll put a bit heavy kettlebell on my knee,
mm-hmm,
and then drive my knee forward under load. Because that's how I want the dorsiflexion to work, is under
yeah,
load. You
under
know,
load, yeah,
or just simply getting in a squat, right?
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, definitely. The actual like to not overcomplicate the whole entire process because a lot of people tend to overcomplicate the process. It's just like what position are you trying to increase your ankle dorsiflexion for?
Yeah.
And if it's a deep squat, get into that deep squat and really try and work that ankle dorsiflexion. Like simple as that. Or just mimic the position that your hip and your knee is going to be in and your ankle during that and just work that range of motion. But again, specificity with that, but then also consistency with it
Mhm.
and frequency. So you have to, especially if it's a long standing thing like me, like if I had bad ankles for a long time, I needed to consistently do that every single day that I went into the gym. So every single day that I went into the gym, it was part of like my warm up sequence that
Mhm.
I knew that that's what was lacking for me. So and this is the thing, people just like, oh, I don't have enough time to do that. It's just like, no, you have enough time to do it. You just need to prioritize what the issue actually is, right?
Mhm.
So if you don't lack hip mobility, like you're good. Don't do no hip mobility.
Yeah.
Just do what you need to do to get into your positions and then also work on your ankle mobility,
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yep.
So yeah,
It's a
frequency,
smarter training.
like yes, smarter approaches to it. So make sure it's position specific.
Mhm.
Make sure it's what you actually need to work on, and just make sure you do it consistently.
Yeah.
Like don't slack off. Even when it gets better, make sure you still reinforce that.
Yes.
All right. So the next one, hip mobility.
Yep, kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think we're a big fan of the 90-90 positions, right?
Yeah. Love that one.
Those are great. Yep, banded hip mobilizations are great. Like you said, you know, even just working the hip in the position that you want to improve it in, you
Hmm.
know? So it's one thing to work hip in you know, like this extended position.
Yeah.
Well, at the bottom of the squat, our hip is in full flexion. So we have to really be in some sort of hip flexion, working internal and external rotation if we want to gain it at the bottom of the squat.
Right.
So kind of just, and that's, you know, do we expect you guys to know that? No, but like that is where like our guidance and our, you know, our professional opinions and recommendations come into play,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, I think like I said, I think a lot of us have become very um very big fans of the 90-90 type
Hmm.
positions. I
Yeah.
think they're just great. And like you said, they're simple enough that you can just throw them into a warm up.
Yeah.
You know, I sit in 90-90, I do like 10 external rotation, 10 internal rotation. I do some windshield wipers, and then I'll sit in the bottom of the squat and kind of do my rotation, and like there's my hip mobility.
Yeah.
Done.
Good to go.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. You can bang out like a lot and just sitting on the floor.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
90-90.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then just another simple thing to think about is just like, I know there's a lot of people who, if you're really wound up in your hips, and one thing, you're probably watching this if you do have back pain, and you might be like really bad with hip mobility. So
Probably.
getting in that 90-90 position might not be the best for you or as comfortable for you as possible, right? So even just sitting in a chair or sitting on a bench
Mm-hmm.
and just rotating inward or kicking that heel out. You can't see my legs, but kicking your heel out and just internally rotating here and holding those positions can be just something that like simple to do in that sense if you lack internal rotation.
Yeah.
Because again, it's kind of mimicking that position that you're going to be in, as well. But yeah, hip mobility, again, we don't have to make it too complicated. One simple way that I tell people, if you lack mobility, just sit in your squats longer. If you lack that mobility, just try and sit in your squats longer. First and foremost, see if that helps out. If that helps you get into a good position and it feels good from there, cool. Maybe you do a whole entire cycle to where you're doing pause squats. So that way you reinforce that position. Because sometimes that could just like literally be the remedy for you. Now, again, it can be more complicated than that and it can be simple. So that's what I'm saying. Like start with the simple fixes first and then maybe add all the other drills that we recommend on top of that if you need more. But again, find what works for you.
Yeah.
Stick to that one specific thing. Do it frequently.
Yeah,
Okay.
there
Do
you
it
go.
frequently. All right. So the next thing is glute activation and strengthening. And we already kind of got into some of the
Yeah.
recommendations there, but do you have any more you want to add or
Yeah,
what are
I
we
think
doing
it's
now?
like I said, utilizing the professional in your life to figure out, okay, is it an activation or a strengthening problem? Or maybe it's both,
Mhm,
right? But like just kind of like we just said, leaning into what your actual problem is,
mhm.
right? If it's an actual glute strength problem, like you need to be doing accessories. That doesn't mean that you can't squat, right? It's also a good way to strengthen the glutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like doing accessories outside of that, or maybe prioritizing your accessories for right now
Mhm.
is where you need to be,
Yeah.
versus just, active, putting the band on your knees and squatting there, if it's just an activation problem.
Right.
So yeah, like I said, leaning into what the problem is and how to address that specifically.
Hmm. Right. And I would say like so if it's a activation problem, it's just like they're not active enough. Just simply like let's put a band around your
Yeah.
knees, to get those active during your warm up and do a different variation of the squat that you're gonna do. Like again, a goblet squat instead of actually doing a back squat, or
Right.
banded back squats leading up to your first set.
Yeah.
From there, if it's a strengthening issue, and here's how you can kind of tell the difference is squats feel good up until you get to a really heavy load and then things start to break down. Then it's a strength issue in some area, right? Either the glutes, could be the low back as well. And you have to load that up a little bit more. Heavy ass good mornings.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
People run away from those because I know one, it's not the funnest exercise at all.
No.
Like you're putting a barbell on your back and then you're just hinging forward.
Yeah.
Not the funnest exercise, but it will get your back hella strong.
Yeah. Well,
Second one for lower trunk strength or lower back strength would be RDLs. Like I ever since I had read Catalyst Athletics, their whole entire book, RDLs has been a staple in my strength programs. Even when it was like squats are first, then RDLs were accessories. Been a staple because they've helped my low back
mhm,
so much.
mhm.
But then if it's the glutes, still the good mornings will help with the glutes as well. The RDLs more specifically because you can load those up really heavily. But then maybe even compound single leg movements
Mhm.
as well, after your main movement, right? So you do your squats and then you go into your single leg RDLs. And this is the thing, people will tend to do maybe 5 extra exercises instead of really putting a lot of effort into 1 to 2 exercises. So if that's you, really think about what is one, the area, glutes or lower back, and which exercise might actually contribute to both of those RDOs more than likely, right? So really focus in on loading those up heavy. If you feel beat up and tired after that, cool, call it a session and be
Yeah.
done with it. Because that's going to get you where you need to go instead of just trying to figure out every single thing that you can
True.
all right. So modify. So the next one is modify, improve positions, positional awareness. So the first thing is modify stance.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a little
Yeah,
bit. Yeah, just kind of like finding again, leaning into what allows you to fix the deficit the best, right? You
yeah,
know, even if it's just the glute, you know, leaning into the version of the squat where you feel like you're activating the glutes, or the area, the position of the squat that allows you to do that without breaking down initially, like training in those areas. You know, we talked positional awareness and adding the tempo, adding the pause, those type of things. So again, leaning into the problem and leaning into where the problem in the squat occurs,
yeah,
that's where you got to train,
yeah,
right? I mean, if you're really good above parallel, well, like, okay, I mean, that's great. We have to get there anyways, right? But
yeah,
like, maybe not train parallel to full standing. Like,
yeah,
we're good there. You got to train the tempo, the pause at below parallel, you know? And I mean, it could be the other way around too,
right,
right?
yeah,
But yeah, like, you have to lean into where you're having the problems and work there, which isn't
yes,
fun, you know.
yeah.
That sucks. That's the shitty part about it.
No, we should take that as like a challenge, right? Like we
Yeah.
should take that as the fun part. Okay, like once I do this whole entire cycle of pause squats or tempo squats, I know once I get back to my main squat, it's gonna feel really good.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be stronger there. Like
Yep.
take it as a challenge to refine your movement and get really good at this movement that you want to be really good at and you don't want to be in pain for,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like that's
Exactly.
the purpose of like what we're talking about here.
Sure.
But it also it just literally blends into performance,
Mhm.
right? Because all these concepts that we're talking about literally can help you improve your squat performance overall. It's not just about like the low back pain with it, but improve your squat performance.
True.
So even if you aren't in pain, like these tips can help you improve your squat performance overall. But what you were saying too, like this, the stance, people, we do have to understand we all have different anatomies. Like, and our stances are going to be different. So if somebody tells you like there's only one way to like actually stand to do a squat, just kind of disregard that information. But basically, in a nutshell, with right. So basically, in a nutshell, with the whole stance thing, just understand like you have to find what stance position feels good for you, right?
Yep.
So you sit into the bottom of the squat, and then figure out where you can space your feet to get the most power out of the bottom, and that doesn't feel like it's too much strain on your hips. And that's kind of like a simple way of thinking about it. Um, and then the other thing that we were talking about with positional awareness is just the tempo work, which is really good. And a simple solution here is just like, all right, let's take our squats down. If it's control, maybe 5 seconds down of a lower. If it's the bottom position, and you gotta be conscious about the bottom position too. Like be active in the bottom and not just kind of like sitting there,
Right.
nothing's engaged. Hold that bottom position. And this goes for those people who are really mobile for the most part, because sometimes if you're really mobile in that bottom position, a lot of things can just start to move around
Yeah.
and you can sit into a deep position that's not really engaged. So you still want to be in that bottom position that's engaged. So 3 seconds in the pause in the bottom, 3 seconds of a pause in the bottom of the squat would be really good for you. And then, like you were saying, visual, verbal, and tactile cueing with the
Yep.
feedback. One thing that helped me so much with my lifting was videoing myself.
Mhm.
Like I didn't have a coach, so I had to look at myself. Well, at a certain time in my lifting journey,
Yeah.
my fitness journey, I didn't have a coach.
Right.
So I recorded myself and then I watched myself
Mhm.
compared to others who squatted really well, or who did Olympic lifts very well. So just to see where I needed to make some improvements on.
Yeah.
So those feedbacks can definitely help for sure. But let's get into the last one here. So it's thoracic mobility and upper posterior chain extension strengthening,
Yep.
right?
So yeah, I mean, thoracic mobility. Yeah, we, again, all these exercises can be prescribed to you, but even just getting on a foam roller, working through. So thoracic, we can go into extension, right? I'm almost like creating an arch in my upper back,
Hmm.
or I can go into flexion, which is the rounding of the upper back. Obviously, what we're looking at here is that we have the extension, range of motion, and the strength, right? But working through foam roll, extension, that type of stuff. But kind of like you were talking about with the hip, being a little more active with it. So sometimes I'll make people sit in the bottom of a squat and they're like hugging a med ball and
Mm,
they're working through thoracic extensions in
yeah.
the bottom of a squat. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
that tends to be where you lose it,
Yeah.
right? So again, leaning into the position where you're having problem. But some of the stuff that you've already talked about too, good mornings,
Yeah.
RDLs, like that doesn't just work the lower posterior chain. No, we
Mhm.
have to maintain posture at the top too.
Yep.
So all these things, like you're lucky for you guys, like you're killing 8 birds with one stone.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's like do the RDLs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's your one accessory.
RDLs.
Yeah. You got your
Do those.
glutes, your hamstrings, your low back, your mid back, like your core.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like pick one, prioritize one really good accessory piece,
Mhm.
and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, for the threat, or we work in bent over rows, barbell
Yeah.
bent over rows.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. You
that is
you're thinking
isometric.
like wait, that's an upper body movement. Yeah, it's an upper body movement, but it's strengthening a musculature that's going to be heavily involved in the squat,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So with that, it's just like, okay, maybe you want to switch it. "No, I don't want to do RDLs all the time. Okay, you don't have to do RDLs all the time.
No.
One of your squat days, you do RDLs for your accessory. The other squat day, you do good mornings for your accessories.
Mhm.
Boom, good to go, right?
Yep.
And then when you're doing another day, I know some people. I'm all about full body training and full body splits. But if you do have like an upper lower body day, on your lower body days, you do those accessories, right? But then on your upper body day, then now you're doing your bent over rows because again, your priority, your focus is your squat.
Yeah.
It's not your rows, but your squats. Okay. So yeah, that's that with that. Anything else to add on there?
No, I don't think so.
I think we covered a lot here. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you have any other questions about like dealing with low back pain in the squat, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. If there's anything else you want to hear us talk about on the podcast, let us know in the comments and we'll definitely consider it for sure. And yeah, if you want to figure out how we can help you, get out of pain and get back to high performance, then go to redemptionphysicaltherapy.com and get a free call. Get on the call, let us know what's going on, and we'll help you out from there. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.